Looks like we have a quorum present. So let's call this meeting to order. And where did I put my agenda? There it is. I guess first things first, we'll take a roll call of the attendees here. Bob Carroll, Doreen DeFazio, Victoria Duckworth,
Present.
Lindsay Fox,
Here.
Anne Marie Foley, Deborah George, Linda Hassinger,
I saw Linda in attendees.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I
Yeah.
did try and promote Linda, but I think she's declining me, but pretty sure she's there.
All right, we'll circle back in a moment with her. Brian Hool. Brian? I saw your lips move and I see your hand waving, but I didn't not hearing you. I'll take that as an acknowledgement. Chantel Kimball,
Here.
Essex Petrie,
Okay.
David Robbins is present. Sue Robbins,
Here.
Colleen Roy.
Yeah.
Roshan Otangi. All right, we have Linda.
I'm here.
All righty. So, did I miss anybody? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nope. 8 committee members, which is sufficient for a quorum. So we'll begin with the first action item, which is to approve meeting minutes. We have posted to the meeting materials page minutes from July 15th. I don't see, we don't have August 5th minutes yet. Okay, so a motion to approve the July 15th minutes would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Victoria Duckworth.
Aye.
Lindsay.
I abstained from voting. I wasn't at the meeting and I didn't actually watch it on Zoom either. I apologize.
Okay. Linda.
Me, yes.
Brian. Nodding his head yes. Chantel.
Yes.
Dave votes yes. Sue.
Aye.
Colleen.
Aye.
Motion carried by a vote of 1 in favor, none against, and 1 abstention. The minutes are approved. Next on the agenda, we have 2 members who've submitted their resignations, Julie Capizzello and Susan Duvall. Motion to accept the resignation, acknowledge the resignations and express our appreciation for their past participation. I would recognize such a motion.
Moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Victoria.
Aye.
Lindsay.
Aye.
Linda.
Aye.
Brian. Chantel.
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Sue.
Aye.
Colleen.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. Yeah, as noted, we are now down to a total of 14 members. Been slowly shrinking, but we're about half the size, half our original size, which was 27. But as long as we have enough people to do business, so we will keep on keeping on for however much longer this has to go. Next action item is to set some meeting dates for October and November. We have Mondays are particularly difficult in October and November. We basically have all 4 October Mondays are not available for us, as are the first 2 November Mondays. So Fiona, do you want to kind of kick this discussion off?
Sure. Sure, thanks, Dave. So yeah, we're in a tough spot. I think it was actually Lindsay who brought this to my attention, I think before, so thank you for doing that. Realizing that we're out of luck in October or for Monday. So we can, if the group is, would like to wait until a date in November and skip October, or have a Tuesday or meeting on a different day, I think Sarah and Elena, maybe I'll have you both chime in and just I guess from a scheduling perspective, where we're at, and kind of your thoughts on it. I know that there's obviously chapter development is actively going on, and I think there's a lot of chapters that are going through finalizations, plus some that'll have draft formats ready for review. But is October feasible for CMRPC, or should we look at early November? And then I'll open that question up to the group once I hear back from you.
So we have economic development and open space chapters in development. They'll be ready toward the end of October. So if we could do an early November meeting, that would be ideal. We also have revisions going on for several chapters. It'd be, if we could have a longer meeting so that we get more done at the end of November, that would be really helpful as well. But November would be ideal.
Okay. Are working group members open to doing, I feel like Mondays and Tuesdays are tough. Is there any do Wednesdays and Thursdays work for folks on this call? Maybe we can consider, I'll get my calendar out here. Should have had it out earlier. The 6th or the 7th. 6th is a Wednesday, 7th is a Thursday, or we could do the following week. That's getting into like mid-November, and I know holiday revving up will be starting, but the 13th is a Wednesday, and then the 14th is a Thursday.
I know Thursdays are tough for me. I'm on a lot of other committees that meet on Thursdays as well.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, Wednesdays and Thursdays are generally good.
I don't have a problem Wednesdays and Thursdays because it's Zoom, so
Mhm.
won't be bad. If Bob has a conflict, though, Thursdays are tough because he does a lot of CMRPC stuff on Thursdays,
Okay. Well, maybe we can,
and he needs a computer.
yeah. So maybe the 6th, and then we can go from, maybe we can start at a little bit earlier, maybe start at 6:30 and go to 8:30. Let's see.
Fine by me.
Yeah, looks like if that works, and maybe we can do that and then just meet then and go over a good amount of material. Elena and Sarah, do you think that's enough time in terms of the 2 hours, or should we be looking a little bit more, a little bit longer?
We're talking about Wednesday.
There's Deborah.
Recording.
I think 2 hours is appropriate, I think.
Wednesday, November 6th.
No, the next one.
And Fiona, just a quick note, our colleague Mike, who will be presenting the land use chapter, he would need to be added as a panelist. I think he's in the waiting room right now, or
Yeah.
he joined the meeting, but he's not a panelist.
Yeah, I did try and promote him, and he declined it, but I'm not sure if he's just waiting for his turn, but I'll try and promote him again.
I think he's waiting, so let's try it again, see if
Okay.
he's able to join.
Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi,
So,
can you guys hear me?
This Deborah?
No,
That's Anne Marie, but she says Colleen Roy.
Okay, thanks.
She didn't have a link, so she just has to rename.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, thanks, Colleen. Do I have to do that on my end? Sorry.
I can
Yep, if you
probably
just
do it.
right click and then rename pops up and then you can just type in your name.
Hmm.
And I can also do it too if you want.
Right, and do I say Deborah George here?
Fiona, if you could do that, that'd be great.
Sure.
All right. I'll mark Deborah George as being in attendance, and that's the second. Colleen Roy is Anne Marie. There we go.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent.
Mr. Chair, if I may just interrupt one last time. So just for Deborah and Anne Marie, just to recap what we just discussed. We're thinking of doing the 6th of November from 6:30 to 8:30. Because there's no Mondays that work in October, and Tuesdays and Thursdays seem to be tough, and CMRPC will have a lot more deliverables ready for review by early November. So if that's okay with you two, and if you know that you're not available, just let us know.
That should be good.
Okay.
It's not.
Dave, the 6th of November I have as IT committee.
Yes, we would normally have an IT committee meeting that first Wednesday. That we can bump that to another date. In the interest of getting this master plan work done, we've been somewhat flexible in IT committee meeting dates in the past.
So this is Anne Marie, and I can make that work.
I'm at the mercy of Bob. So if he needs a computer, I can't have it, but if he doesn't need it and the IT is canceled, I'm on.
Okay.
I
Sounds good.
kind of can't be in more than one meeting at a time. So, like I said, in the interest of moving this master plan work forward, I will discuss with the IT committee and the town administrator who we would be meeting with an alternative IT committee meeting date.
Thank you all for being flexible. I'm sorry I didn't catch this earlier.
All right, so we're all set. Unless something happens to change it, we will have our next meeting on Wednesday, November 6th, and we'll make it a 2-hour meeting starting at 6:30. All right, with that, we have on the agenda to discuss the housing and land use chapters. Housing comes first on the agenda, but I think we can take them in whichever order works better. But
I think we'll start with housing, if that's okay with the committee.
that works for me.
My colleague Emily, who's the author of this chapter, she is traveling. She's unable to join us today, so I will present the main points of the chapter. I'll try to stay within 30 minutes so that Mike has about the same amount of time to go through the land use chapter. So I will not go through all the sections of the housing chapter, but I will cover some select areas. Feel free to stop me along the way and ask any questions you might have and comments. And with that, Sarah, if you could scroll to the key findings. The first, and I think, the typical data point that we start with is population change. I'll go through a few of our findings and then I'll move on to the recommendations. You're all already familiar with the recommendations. We've worked on them together. I want to walk us to some of the data that we collected on housing and population. So population change, we have drawn on data produced by our transportation department and specifically their population projections, which are estimating that Grafton's population will continue to increase. And with a town reaching anticipated of 22,931 residents by 2050. So these are our projections. They're slightly different than the Mass DOT projections. We have a slightly different methodology. Mass DOT is showing a slight decline. Our projections are showing an increase in population. And obviously this has implications for housing, specifically for housing unit production, and the fact that so far it hasn't kept pace with the rising populations. So this has placed pressure on the cost of housing and the housing market. And Sarah, if you could move to figure 1. So you're seeing here a graph of our population projections. So up until 2020 is actual population growth, and from then on, it's our projections for the region. We are taking into account migration, climate migration, and other factors. So as I said, this is more of a methodological difference. And this is why we're anticipating Grafton will continue to grow. Another demographic shift is an increase in diversity of the population, racial diversity. Figure 2 is showing the population composition in 2020. So according to the 2020 census. Another finding, Sarah, if you could move on to the next one, is household composition. This is an interesting finding. It's showing a decline in single person households, which is unlike the regional trend, or at least in the neighboring towns where we see an increase in single person household. This goes hand in hand with the aging population, but in Grafton, we're seeing the opposite, which suggests several trends. We know that Grafton is an attractive place for families, and 1/3 of all the households have children under the age of 18. This is in part due to the quality of the schools, but obviously there are many other quality of life factors that make Grafton attractive to families. There's also this spillover effect, populations that are priced out of other areas in the Boston Metro find Grafton to be an attractive place to live. And we believe that this is a trend that will continue. And this change in household demographics is also calling into question whether Grafton really has the housing stock to accommodate this population. And, a question mark that we have for this data, this decline in single family households may not just be families moving into the area. We think it could be also an increase in roommates living together because they cannot afford rising housing costs. So this could also be an effect of that household change. And of course, there's also a limited supply of studio and 1-bedrooms that also can factor into this. Age distribution, much like the rest of the region, Grafton has an aging population. This has very clear implications for housing, insofar as it will require the town to address appropriate housing options and supporting services. So the housing for seniors would imply not just specific housing types that allow for downsizing or aging in place, It also implies availability of services and modifications to existing homes to meet to meet ADA compliance. There's specific state grants for that process that the town could keep in mind. And also, of course, with the Housing Act, we now have accessory dwelling units by right. We don't know yet whether that will result in an increase in accessory dwelling units, because there are costs associated with it that don't necessarily make it a good investment, but it is one more option in the toolbox that Grafton has to accommodate this aging population and multi-generational living. And then one last note on the section, the number of school-age children has increased. This again would hint to this trend of families moving to Grafton, but interestingly, enrollment has declined, and you can see this in figure 6. It is, we think, an effect of COVID. It's not just Grafton. We're seeing enrollment decline across the board in many communities in the region. But given that Grafton has had a significant increase in enrollment, we think this can be attributed to COVID rather than the larger economic factors such as, declining income or decrease in population.
Fiona, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Elena, I just, I had a question and a comment. So I did not get a chance to review all of this in depth prior to this meeting. Are we able to submit comments into the matrix?
Yes,
Anything we
absolutely.
want to add? And is there a date that you would like that done by, so that you're not continuing to have to review comments up until, over the course of the next month? Should we plan to do it within 2 weeks, or?
2 weeks would be ideal. We
Okay.
could also do 3 weeks, so about 10 days to a week before our next meeting, so that Emily has a chance and we have a chance to meet internally and talk about the revisions.
Okay, awesome.
But yes, absolutely. Comments are open.
Okay, great. And I just wanted to kind of make a remark about, so yeah, the housing bond bill, it's a biggie. I think we're all still trying to figure out how we're going to navigate it. But something that I did notice in Grafton, we do get a lot of applications for accessory apartments. I think we've permitted, and I don't know, comparatively speaking, compared to maybe like Millbury or Shrewsbury are some of our neighbors, but I believe we have about 75
Oh, that's significant.
applications for so Grafton does do quite a bit of there's quite a bit of activity already, so it'll just interesting to see what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
It's really, it's a complicated, with ADUs, they do not appraise the same as the main structure. They appraise like 50 cents on the dollar more often than not, and it's unpredictable. So it's not necessarily an investment, which deters some family from investing $200,000 in building one of these structures, when you could take that $200,000 and buy a new home. But families that have that need and that don't look at this as an investment might actually, we think that's where the change is going to happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, it's very interesting. We're trying to keep our eye on that topic in particular and just try and inform people. So I'm glad we're having that conversation here as well.
Yeah, and maybe this is where we should take note of short-term rentals and regulations for short-term rentals, because those would encourage, you can monetize an ADU if there's permissive short-term rental legislation regulations.
But I don't think you can I don't think the law, I don't, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that you can't have it be a short-term rental.
Right, though it doesn't have to be owner occupied, not to get into the weeds here, sorry.
Yeah,
but,
sorry.
no, it's a fascinating topic, but it opens many opportunities.
Yeah, and I can share, again, I don't want to take up too much time, but we're trying to roll out, the planning department is trying to roll out like an information page on our website once we accumulate more resources, and I'll make sure to put all my information in the comment matrix too, so.
Right, so short-term rental, we can revisit this some other time, but
Yeah, that's a topic that we really haven't had to address so far here in Grafton. It has not caught our attention, but it may in the near future that may be one thing that we want to start contemplating. But we don't have any local regulation of short-term rentals now. I know some towns, particularly in the Cape and Islands, have been struggling with that quite a bit lately.
absolutely.
But that's a discussion for another day, I think, right here.
Yeah, I think Grafton hasn't seen pressure on long-term rentals from short-term rentals. I think that's when regulations come into place to protect the housing stock. But yes, that would be something to address for sure. Thank you for that point. Moving on to demand for more diverse housing options. This is, something that has come up in our conversations multiple times. The interesting finding we have here, well, the very well-known fact is that there's a mismatch between the composition of the households and the housing types in Grafton. We know that single families continue to dominate the housing stock in sheer numbers. But, and Mike will speak more to this, the rate of development of single family homes has been outpaced by multifamilies, and he will show you the data about this. But if Sarah, if you could scroll to figure 7, as expected, the proportion of single family housing remains the majority. Single family and townhouses remain the majority of the units in Grafton. Hence the discrepancy between household composition and the type of units that are needed, especially for an aging population that needs to downsize.
Yeah, I think I'd like to throw in an observation here on this very topic too. Not so very long ago, I took a look at the the pace of development, or the I should say how the housing stock has changed. Basically, looking back many years, you can see that just after World War II, I look back 75 years, in 1949, the housing stock in Grafton, there were roughly 2,000 total units. Half of them were single family detached homes. The other half were multifamilies, anywhere from 2-family on up. So there was a balance there, 50-50, ownership, basically ownership and rental. Since that time, Grafton has added about over 5,000 single family ownership units. That's single families plus condos. Condos came into Grafton in 1980, but in 75 years, we've added over 5,000 ownership units and 1,000 rental units. And I've got a graph that really shows you. I'll send that to you. But I think to just sort of to really emphasize the extent to which single families and condos combined as ownership units have so thoroughly dominated Grafton's development over the last 75 years. Yeah, it kind of reinforces the point. This is not just recent. This has happened. It's very steadily growth. Now, I would I would like that, to consider including that particular, just to, again, to emphasize that point here.
Yeah, thank you for the reminder, David. We do have that document, but if you've updated it in the meantime, thank you for the reminder. We should incorporate it. Is it the review of housing that you prepared a while back?
Yeah, well, this is sort of the document I've previously posted and shared goes into more detail, the breakdown of different unit types. I think what the chart I've produced more recently really simplifies it, just to compare the two types of housing, the typically ownership and typically rental, which I think it makes a point without getting too overly detailed. And again, I think
Yeah, that would be great to have.
yeah, I will send that after this meeting.
Thank you. Because, we've seen policy at work in Grafton. It has made a difference. It's changed the trends. And again, Mike will speak more to this. The market has played into this to a certain extent as well. It matched the demand. So town policies can only go so far in changing what gets developed where if the market is not in tune. But absolutely, we would love to incorporate that data in this. I think it would be very useful. And on that note, the next section focuses on ownership unit production is outpacing rentals. Again, this is a regional trend as well. What we're seeing in Grafton, if you could go to figure 8, there's a slight decline in the production of rental units. So it went down from 20 to 25, and the production of owner-occupied units went up to 75%. And this obviously this decline affects lower income population in Grafton, and it's putting even more pressure on the need for affordable housing and young professional or families that are just starting out. Next section, insufficient affordable housing production. Grafton is still at 5.53% SHI. 9 Pine Street was the development, as far as we understand it. Please let us know if we have these facts wrong, but from what we understand, 9 Pine Street development was supposed to add 300 units, which would have put Grafton close to that 10%, 9 point something percent. But given that development fell through, this percentage hasn't moved much. So as of 2020, Grafton needed a total of 774 affordable housing units to meet the SHI requirement.
Yeah, Fiona?
Yep, thanks, Dave. So Elena, I think, yeah, so when Emily was probably first drafting this, that's where we're at. We're actually at around, I think we're at 9 point. I'll send you the most current SHI inventory that we have, but we are now at 9.1%. And we've actually hit safe harbor targets to because of the development that we the 40B at 116 Upton. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that project added 152 units into the inventory, allowing us to reach that threshold and therefore declare safe harbor for the next 2 years. So I will send you that information. Sorry that I didn't catch that before. That was my fault. And I just also want to say and confirm, yes. So 8 Pine Street was the development that you were talking about, permitted in 2021. There was 300 and oh gosh, Dave, maybe you can confirm.
317.
317. I knew there was a 7 in there. Thank you. 317 units. They didn't pull their permits in time. So yeah, they fell off, and obviously 317 compared to our total year-round housing stock was quite significant. So it did throw Grafton for a loop. We try and obviously stay on top of updating the inventory in a feasible way, but yes, that is what happened there.
Yeah, plus
you know if-
8 Pine Street may be coming back into the picture. They're
Mhm.
they are at least hoping to reactivate that. I don't. We just gave them an extension of their permit, and there's a couple of other things that are somewhere in the SHI pipeline. But yeah, Fiona, you can provide Elena with the latest information on everything SHI.
Yes.
Thank you for that update. Thank you.
Anne Marie?
So just confirming you guys will change those couple of paragraphs to
Of
reflect.
course, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And we don't need to delve into the 8 Pine Street. We assumed it was financing that
Yeah.
made the development fall through. Maybe we don't need to get into the details. What we want to note here is the pipeline. So if they are in the pipeline, then we'll make a note.
Mhm.
But thanks for this information. This is great news.
Cost of money.
So maybe our data about the amount or rate of growth of multifamily will change drastically as well.
Yes, there are a number of multifamily developments in various stages of
Right.
construction or approval or potential. I mean, you really can't, you don't know it's going to happen until they've at least broken ground.
Right. Lindsay, I see that you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question for you guys at CMRPC. What is considered like a healthy percentage or goal of rental housing compared to ownership in like a suburban town or town like ours that you guys have seen?
That is a very good question. I wouldn't say Grafton has an unhealthy percentage. I think in gateway cities, we see about 60-something% ownership and 40-something% rentals. Very different economy though. So in a bedroom community, we expect to see something like 80 to 90%. But in lower income areas, that proportion changes. So you start to see 60 to 70%, even in a bedroom community.
Of ownership
So
versus rental or rental versus
ownership, yeah. So ownership will always be larger, the larger proportion in a bedroom community. But when we see different there's so many variables playing into this proportion. So, in Fitchburg, those numbers will mean a very different thing. I don't know where Fitchburg is, but I think they're around 60-something% ownership, if my memory serves me right. So at 75%, Grafton has a very different economy. So
Yeah,
I
and
was just
you
trying
also
to,
have
like,
to
describe it.
take into consideration that one of the reasons for such a high ratio of ownership to rental is that throughout Massachusetts, particularly the greater Boston area, for decades, there's been a bias against rental housing, which is reflected in the zoning, which is reflected in a lot of ways. So yeah, I was telling you earlier about, looking back 75 years and to see how 75 years ago, Grafton was about 50-50 ownership and rental. And now we're like, approaching 80-20.
Gotcha. I was just trying to see kind of like what we're striving for, is there?
Yeah, and like I was starting to say, when I was looking at that, I was asking myself, well, what would an appropriate balance be? And I'm quite sure 50-50 would not be an appropriate balance. But if there were no market constraints, no disincentives for developing multifamily, ultimately the market would kind of balance out to match supply and demand. But where that balance would be for a community like Grafton, I don't know if anybody can possibly calculate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the presence of an employer, a large employer. Grafton has Wyman Gordon, but it isn't the type of employers that you would see in the Boston Metro that would attract a higher proportion of renters. Grafton is not technically a bedroom community, but that's where you see different numbers.
Thank you.
Sure. Moving on to housing market conditions. We know costs are continuing to rise. We found that the median, so what we're noting here is trends. There's been a very rapid increase in Grafton, especially compared to its neighbors. So in 2000, the median home value was 183,500. And in 2022, according to ACS, it's 453,000. Condos have increased in price as well. The median sale price for condos is 426,500. That would be very different, of course, than the ACS median value. It's usually higher, the median sale price. And then notably, rents have increased as well. And according to ACS in 2000, there were 625 per month. And in 222, the median rent is 1,291 per month. But this is, I should note that ACS estimates the rents much, much lower than where the market is. So if we look on Zillow, we will see $2,000 as the going rate for a 2-bedroom, for example. But we work with census numbers, so this is what they are. And then another notable statistic is moving on to affordability mismatch. This is an important data point. So the cost of housing has increased much more rapidly than the median household income. So that would be figure 12.
Wow.
Yeah, it's, this is of course statewide, nationwide as well, but I'm thinking maybe for this graph, it might be worth comparing Grafton with neighboring communities, Shrewsbury, Auburn.
Yeah, Elena, actually, to that point, I was thinking a lot of these data points will tell a really great story if we do compare Grafton to some of our neighbors, like just as what you said, Shrewsbury would probably be on the higher end, but also, maybe like Millbury, Westboro. Sometimes I feel like it's like sometimes when you're reading this, it looks like, oh, Grafton is shifting in these significant ways, which we are, but it's also, I feel like, helpful for the reader to kind of understand what's going on around, and it also puts into context the severity of the change in Grafton. And I'll put that in the matrix too, but just something I wanted to reiterate.
That would be great. Yeah, noted. We definitely should have that comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Anne Marie?
Yeah, so on the 2022 data, is that like an estimate it says up above versus actual or?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
2022, 2020 is the actual, so that's when the census did the actual countings, and the ACS 5-year estimate is basically a projection or estimate.
Okay.
Moving on to goal 1. So these are goals that we've developed together. We pretty much kept the order in place for this chapter, and we added more details into these sections. So going through them quickly, the first one was about the direction of development, and the consensus was that growth should be concentrated in the village centers. And that's something that the town has, of course, addressed in various plans and various village plans, and has incentivized development in this area. So basically, we're calling for a continuation of this approach to housing. And as well as encouraging multifamily dwellings, so encouraging density in the village centers in particular. We have a section here that is more of a question. David, you suggested we include a few notes on subdivision regulations. Emily had a couple of, she was wondering what direction she might take these 2 objectives into. We address subdivisions in land use as well, but in particular here, if you could refer us to a source or make some suggestions, I think it would be very helpful in developing these 2.
Yeah, I'd have to, I don't have a whole lot off the top of my head, except under the B, there are strengthening subdivision requirements for preserving open space. In particular, I'm thinking that we want to, I would suggest that we look at sort of, in a sense, updating and strengthening our flexible development. There are a couple of concepts that are referenced in recent state law, and other communities, I think, seem to be working in this direction. Natural resource protection zoning and open space residential development or open space development. The open space development in particular is a concept, sort of an evolution of cluster development, flexible development, where we have the opportunity to have stronger regulations about requiring the use. As it is, and this comes up also in other, like other places in land use and everything. But today, in flexible development, allow it, without getting too far into the weeds, the flex as an alternative to conventional is basically the developer's choice. And what I'm thinking is, I would like us to take a good look at making it mandatory. And I think we can talk about some of how successful flex has been, and think about, what I'm suggesting for the plan here is that one of the action items to be to study, for Grafton to investigate the feasibility and appropriateness of open space development and natural resource protection zoning, 2 related concepts which may have the effect of strengthening our subdivision requirements for preserving open space. So I see some hands, Anne Marie, and then Bob, and then Fiona.
Sorry, mine was just up from last time.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, as I just read through that, it was exactly what we said was the reason to adopt our flexible development back in I think it was 91.
It was.
Exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I have some numbers that illustrate what Flex has done for us, which I think I made those notes in the context of the land use plan. But again, as you point out, this overlaps quite a bit with the land use, and it's just, if nothing else, we want to make sure that what we say here is consistent with what we say, you know, in the land use chapter.
That
Fiona?
makes sense.
Yeah, just to point, I know that this is talked about a bit in some of the recommendations in the housing production plan. There's also some recommendations in our open space and rec plan that overlap with this. And yeah, I just want to reiterate, you know, taking a look at our section of our zoning bylaw that kind of dictates flexible versus conventional developments, and as well as subdivision regs. But I mean, most of the time, and Dave, you have the numbers probably, you know, top of mind, but most of the time developers are going to pursue the flexible option because it's a lot more financially viable. But I think we could do a better job as a town, kind of revisiting that and strengthening that. So that's it's incorporated more than we've been seeing.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks so much.
Bob again.
I wonder, is it possible to, it seemed to me that I remember when we adopted our flexible development, that some places made the choice of, it required two plans, and the choice of which one was approved was an option of the planning board decided. In Grafton, the developer decides. I wonder if there's a possibility as something that could be done.
Mike, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I don't want to muscle in on the housing section of this presentation. Just on that flexible development, which is really an important option if one could make it mandatory. And I'm looking at this at the moment because we're doing some work on subdivision regulations for CMRPC. The difficulty, I believe, is that the subdivision law is very specific, that the subdivision law can only require compliance with the zoning. So the subdivision regulations can only require compliance with the zoning bylaw. So if the zoning bylaw permits a standard development, it will be very difficult, I believe, to draft the subdivision regulations in such a way that you can preclude the subdivision of land into a conventional, into a scheme that complies with a conventional zoning bylaw. If it could be done, that would be ideal, but I believe that that's the barrier to it at the moment, that you have to ultimately give the developer the option as to which way he wants to go.
Bob?
The choice is in the zoning, not in the subdivision.
That's right.
In our case. So I think you were saying you can't do it in subdivision rules, but what I'm talking about was in zoning. And in the zoning, it says they get, before we close the hearing, they tell us which one they want to go with, or they are going to go with. And I think other towns have, there were towns that had the planning board decided. So anyway.
Yeah, we're not going to yeah, my recommendation is that you know, in one of our action items we follow up on these, on the thoughts here. That, yeah, we're not going to spend the time now trying to work it all out, but, yeah. Anne Marie?
Yeah, to that point, it seems to me that for the purposes of the master plan, we're not looking to be so specific so that in 10 years from now, or however long this particular plan lasts, that we have pigeonholed people into various things. And this seems to me to fall on various boards, just the level of specificity that you and Bob are speaking to. So that's my opinion.
Thanks for those comments. I'm keeping an eye on the time here, so I will just
Yes.
very quickly go through some of the goals. And again, we'll be happy to take comments from you, so I won't go into too much details. We've talked about most of these. I just wanted to highlight that objective B under goal 2, foster the development of town-owned property. This is what we're recommending here, is a partnership with the Affordable Housing Trust. And the properties we call out, I just want to make sure we're accurate here: 25 Worcester Street and the Grafton High School, the site of the former Grafton High School, and 53 Millbury Street as examples of land disposition that the town could do along with the Affordable Housing Trust.
Yep, the trust is currently working on 25 Worcester Street on the development there. The trust has been looking at 53 Millbury, but they haven't, they haven't committed to doing they're looking, they're focused right now on 25 Worcester, but they are working on that.
Okay, yeah, we saw this in the housing production plan. We were not sure how far along this is. But we'll keep the note for both of them, given that this is still in progress. I will skip to,
Can I make a quick comment? So the former high school, is that the current middle school?
No, the 25 Worcester Street is where the Grafton High School was way back when. That was actually
So that's all I
building,
know.
right, the building was torn down, I think, in the
I got it.
70s or 80s.
I understand. I just saw those as two separate things, so they're the same. And then the 53 Millbury Street, that's where potentially the cemetery would be looking to expand. That's that property?
Yes.
Yes.
So we're gonna put that specific property in this master plan?
if
We
you think,
can, Anne Marie. I think it's it's up to really, the group. I mean, some of these, 53 Millbury, I know that land in particular, that has been something that's tried to gain traction over time and hasn't really moved forward with as much progress as some of these other developments. But we can get to that level of detail
Okay.
if
I
you'd
guess
like.
my comment would be that I wouldn't want to see that level of detail, but that's just my opinion.
Colleen?
I'm going to share a little bit of concern with the 53 Millbury Street as well, considering it is owned by the cemetery, calling out land that we don't. I mean, cemetery was really hard pressed about giving that up. So I just would have concern about calling that out in a master plan. I don't think it's something we should give up on, but I don't know if it belongs here specifically.
noted, thank you. We can remove that reference.
That's really very, very specific, and we were talking about what the master plan should or shouldn't, what level it should be at, talking about. Although we did have one in our previous master plan that eventually did work out. The land that the library ended up on was noted in the development of that master plan, and it went in there and a bunch of years, but eventually we got the land and we're able to build the library,
The addition.
the addition to the library.
Thank you. Moving on to goal 3. I'm skipping over quite a few of them, but once again, you can leave comments. Increase Grafton's affordable housing stock. So this is, we went into a little bit of detail here. Continue to use friendly 40Bs. So the local initiative program, that's something the town has been doing and should be continuing. We're also recommending to incentivize the inclusion of affordable units in developments that are not friendly 40Bs or 40Bs, and incentivizing mixed income developments near transit areas. And wanted to draw your attention to, on page 15, goal 3, objective 4. Specifically, it is consider establishing linkage fees to fund affordable housing development. We're recommending this because we feel Grafton's housing market is strong enough to warrant establishing linkage fees, but we also wanted to get your thoughts on this, if this is a recommendation that we should, I see that Fiona has her hand up.
Yeah, Elena, and I'm not 100% up to speed on all of the kind of nuance associated with linkage fees, but isn't there some like state legislation that kind of prevents this?
That's a good question.
I think there is. I'll look into it. I know there's something and I just can't. I think that there's certain state level protections against certain forms of linkage fees. So let me confirm and get back to you. I'll put it in the matrix. But I just wanted
Yeah.
to flag it because I do know that we had a recent development before the board where that very thing was well, not the exact thing, but that conversation came up, and I'll have to pull that info out.
Thank you for flagging that. Yeah, we'll revisit this.
Can I just ask a quick question? Are linkage fees also transfer fees? Is that also what they're called? Like when people sell a property, the transfer fee that they were trying to do through the state? It,
No,
it
that's a
didn't
different
go.
concept.
It is a different thing? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to objective B. Establish town support for affordable housing by allocating funds to the Affordable Housing Trust, and specifically making the rental assistance program that was voted in 2023, making that an ongoing program. That's one recommendation. Partnerships with nonprofit, for-profit and nonprofit housing developments, that there are many examples in other towns that have worked out. So POA, for example, is a great nonprofit partner. We get into some details about partnerships with developers. We've seen Grafton have success with developments in North Grafton, and we've actually spoken to a developer that mentioned that partnership with the town and active conversations as being really a determinant in them choosing to develop in Grafton. So continuing that type of work and conversations with developers is really crucial in attracting developers. And then I think that is it. That was the last one. partnership. Yep, that's it. With that, I will turn it over to Mike.
Thanks very much. And thank you for the really helpful and useful comments that I've already received on the land use chapter. I'm going to try to go through this quite quickly and just starting with the key findings and priorities. The thing that really strikes me on looking at the work that we're doing now, the research work, the community survey, and comparing it with the work that was done in 2001, is that the overwhelming feeling that comes from in relation to land use issues that comes from the community survey in the recent one we've just done is almost exactly the same as it was in the survey that was done for the 2001 plan. People want to retain the small town feeling of Grafton. They want to retain the rural atmosphere and the community-centered feeling of the town. That's what they still want. And that tells us really two things. First of all, that over the last 25 years, those things have preserved. They have been preserved. There's still something there to protect. But at the same time, people are still concerned that they might lose them. So in a way, what the overall brief to us drafting the plan is pretty much the same as the brief for the 2001 plan. And if we go and look at the 2001 plan, this is on page 3, Sarah, there were effectively two things that the 2001 plan was aimed at doing. One was a set of measures to try to discourage, if you like, development, urban sprawl on open space and agricultural land. There was a series of measures that was proposed for that. And the obverse of that was to encourage higher density, more intense land use in the villages and the more urban areas. Now, if we go through the implementation of the 2000 plan, in fact, the first set of recommendations was less actively pursued than the second. So things like Chapter 61 protection was pursued, but it's not hugely strong. There was the purchase of agricultural land, and this there is a discrepancy in the figures that has been brought to our attention. And I don't think we probably have time to sort that out now, but I would like to try and sort that out as we go. I think it may be that the figures that I have been working on are land that is still in the ownership of the town. So it may not take into account properties that were bought and subsequently sold. But properties were bought, and there were a number of these measures were implemented, but not, if you like, as effectively or not as concertedly implemented as the recommendations that had to do with the villages and the intensification of the small towns. So if we look at what happened as a result of that plan, if we could move to page 7, Sarah, which really looks at what happened. So we've got the implementation, we've got the result, and of course we can't pin all the results to the comprehensive plan. Unfortunately, it would be very nice in some cases to do so. But in practice, we have to recognize that market forces, the financial crisis, COVID, they've all had an impact. But nevertheless, if we look at what has happened in terms of trying to discourage urban sprawl as opposed to more intensive development, we can see, first of all, and those figures there show, and I've looked more carefully at growth rates than at absolute growth. So whereas the housing chapter focuses a lot on absolute growth, I'm looking more carefully at growth rates. And this shows that the population is going to go on growing, but at a declining rate. So that the pressure from population growth, if those projections are accurate, that pressure will remain, but the pressure will get less. And if we go down and look at the housing, what's really interesting about this is, and here you can see over the time of the comprehensive plan, the housing growth was very much lower in the 2000. At the time of the comprehensive plan, there was a lot of concern about housing growth. That housing growth dropped, but then it has gone up quite startlingly between 2010 and 2022. But if we go down again, a little further down, Sarah, we see these figures, which show that if you look at what is being built, and again, as we saw in the housing chapter, the overwhelming majority of housing is still detached single-family units. But if we look at the rate of growth between 1990 and the first decade of the comprehensive plan, the rate of growth of single housing development, detached housing development, dropped much more than the growth of attached and multifamily development. And by the 2010 to 22 period, the rate of growth of single family attached and multi-housing development has actually overtaken. So in terms of growth rate, the objective of that master plan, or of the comprehensive plan, which was to say, let's stop the sprawl of detached residential units, it hasn't stopped, but the rate of growth of attached units has overtaken it. If we can move on down, Sarah, please. That's just another way of showing it, that actually the attached unit growth has been 3 times the rate of growth of the detached units. And there are a whole lot of other ways of looking at that we can go through. But what they tell us is that the growth that has taken place has been much more focused on the R20 zone than on the agriculture and the R40 zones, and that there has been a shift in momentum towards attached houses. So if you could please run down to those, the visuals, which are taken from further on down. There's the maps. Sorry, those pictures are not loading. These are 2 plans that are taken from David Robbins's data, which show, and unfortunately we haven't got the visual impact. The visual impact is very starkly different. In the older plan, in the years leading up to 2007 and in the years after 2007, there's a visibly reduced impact of housing development on the landscape. So I think that one of the key findings out of this is that actually, whether to whatever extent it can be attributed to that plan, that objective of that plan has been quite successful. On the other side, dealing with the intensification of the use of the of land use in the villages, a huge amount of work has been done on that. And no, I'm afraid they're still not loading for some reason. And that work has taken time to come to fruition, so that right at the moment, it doesn't feel all that much different from how it was in 2001. But if you look at what's actually happening, and again, the comments on this document have updated that further, that development is happening in South Grafton. There is the soil is beginning to be turned on developments. We know that there is the whole development around the station is reaching fruition. So again, a huge amount of the work that was to be done in terms of that plan has been done, and it looks as if it's more and more bearing fruit. So effectively, what we are saying in this land use chapter is the key pressing issue remains the same issue, which is to maintain the quality of Grafton that people want and love. That the direction of the previous comprehensive plan was the right direction, that what it was trying to do is gradually coming about. And really what we need to be doing here is to be doing the same, only perhaps a little bit more and in slightly different ways to try and catch up. So I've jumped right down, Sarah. I'm sorry, it's almost impossible for you to keep up with me on this, but I'm conscious of time. We also have done just a quick assessment of the overall development patterns. And this is on pages about 15 to 18, saying, while we need to do the same, we need to differentiate a bit between the different areas. So there are different conditions in South Grafton, in the center, in North Grafton, and in the east-west corridor along that runs through North Grafton. We need to be conscious that that there are different things that need to happen there. And I would like actually to put a plan together which just outlines those different areas, which relates to what we're saying are different things that are to happen. But primarily, although we need to distinguish between those areas, primarily what we are needing to do is similar to what was done or to what was proposed in the comprehensive plan. And if we then go down to your goals, these are on start on page 18, the goals that have already been discussed, that reflects in a way that we're looking at those same things. But there are a couple of particular actions that we would like to explore more. So part of the difficulty with those the general group of recommendations to discourage development in the rural areas is that a lot of them have an impact on what people perceive as their right to do what they want to do with their property. So if you down zone, if you redefine the way you define the zone, even if you impose a restriction, a time restriction, that has the effect. It runs into opposition in our experience from people who don't want their rights, their property rights to be affected. What we suggest is that we look very carefully, or the Grafton looks very carefully, at a transfer of development rights process, which involves buying the rights from a landowner, so they are not dispossessed of rights, buying the rights for to develop in areas where you don't want that development to take place, and transferring those rights to places where you do want development to take place, and crafting that process so that the rights are available to purchase if people are doing exactly what you want them to do. So the reuse and conversion of buildings, for instance, the densification of the areas that you want to densify, specific types of development that you want to prioritize, can be where the rights can be purchased, and you therefore effectively transfer the rights from the areas you don't want to develop to both the places and the types of development that you do want to develop. So that's a major action item that we are suggesting. We're also suggesting continuation of land acquisition, because that's an important element that seems to have been successful. In relation to the towns, effectively, and there are a lot of other things that are being recommended here, but I'd just like to draw your attention to a couple of them. We are looking at, or we're proposing a diagnostic exercise, which says, in respect of what we've already done, because we've gone 20 years down the road with this, where has it worked, where has it not worked, and particularly in conjunction with developers, to try and fine-tune and say what is working well, what isn't working so well, as one exercise, looking at the whole town, but perhaps in particular at South Grafton. We're suggesting a plan, a detailed plan for the center, and a detailed plan for North Grafton, and particularly the western part of that east-west corridor. And then we're looking at other, other supplementary things, if you like. For instance, the zoning scheme diagnostic, we think is important. And although I have to say your subdivision regulations, I think, are probably more updated than almost any town in the district or in the region, it is important perhaps to look at particular aspects of those subdivision regulations. But what I've done, I think, is I've highlighted those main action items which might be a little different, and which you might want to take a careful look at before we go into the further drafts. I'm sorry if I have rather rushed through that, but I'd obviously love to take questions and discuss anything that anybody would like to chat about.
Excuse me, Mike, this is a little roundabout, so it's a little blurry. So on the left is 85 to 2006 housing development. On the right is 2007 to 2021. Purple is single family.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I mean, I think that gives a really useful view, because, I mean, it's been suggested to me that I shouldn't suggest that the one on the left looks like a rash. But certainly the one on the right would give, I think, is cause for a kind of less alarm. It doesn't, if you look at the one on the right, it doesn't look as if the purple is swamping the white, and so the housing taking over the open space as much as it did on the left. And it's taking that trend, which is established, and reinforcing that trend, which is the main focus of of what the land use element of the master plan we suggest needs to be doing.
Yeah, I think you can correlate these two time periods also with kind of the general economic conditions as it relates to housing. Basically, the region here, we saw a dramatic increase in housing development starting in the early to mid 80s. It slacked off a bit in the 90s, but then there was another large amount of housing development that occurred in the early 2000s. And what happened in 2007, 2008? There was this little housing market problem that we had, and that basically seems to have dramatically curtailed new housing development. And that, I mean, when I put these together, that's sort of the thing that stuck in my mind as a major explanation of the difference here was that the crash of 2007, 2008 really put a damper on housing development, and to this day it really hasn't recovered from that. We had a particularly large amount of development in the early 2000s and in the mid 1980s.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think that the real risk that we from this point of view, the real risk we face is that if the interest rates come down as they're expected to come down and the support for housing strengthens, we may see a very, very hot housing development market taking off over the next 10 years. So really what the planning emphasis needs to be is to try to make sure that new growth doesn't go back into the pattern on the left, that it reinforces the pattern on the right.
Yeah, and that's kind of been, one of my driving, thoughts is that we can expect housing development to continue. People are going to need housing. But what we'd like to be able to do, and sort of when we put all this together, everything that we're trying to do here, at least in my own mind, I think we'd like to see, and I think the survey that we put out kind of reinforces, we would like to see housing development in a somewhat different direction than it has been historically for the last 30 or 40 years. To focus more of it and we've kind of captured a lot of that in both the housing chapter and the land use chapter. We kind of captured the idea of sort of incentivizing development of the housing in a direction that's less sprawly, which is easier said than done, of course.
Yeah.
Anything else on this topic? If no one has anything else, I have one picture I would like to share if I could.
Yeah.
If I can be allowed to share a screen here.
Sorry. All right, you should be all set.
All right, now where did I put that picture? So this is a map I made recently to kind of, look at the housing density patterns in Grafton. This is taking the housing density on the various lots that have housing, but it is putting them sort of making this, some people call this a heat map, just to kind of show how the housing density is distributed around Grafton. The blue areas are the higher density, the pink areas are very low density, orange a little bit higher, yellow a little bit higher. And then you get into the green and blue areas where you see the greatest housing density. And this is what we have currently. This is as of the as of the 2023 data I got from the assessor's office. And this, I've added in the new approved projects. At the top here, 8 Pine Street, 5 Millennium Drive, 1727 Upton Street, 116 Upton, Pleasant Street. So this is basically the housing density that Grafton is likely to see. But the point of this is to give you kind of a picture of where housing density currently is in Grafton. And it's fairly easy to see how the large areas of Grafton are relatively low density. I just thought this is potentially interesting in terms of thinking about, how do we move forward? Where do we focus development? Where do we think about maybe increasing incentives to focus the housing more? The major village areas here in the center and south and north. So I just, this is something that might be interesting to include in some way in the plan, or at least it might inform some of our thinking.
Thank you, David. We would be very interested in including these in the plan. And it's
Absolutely.
yeah. And it's interesting to see the new developments, the 40+ units, if I see your legend correctly,
Yes.
and the fact that they occur along the major corridors, which makes sense. It's in line with.
Yep. Yep. And in particular, you'll notice up here, 8 Pine Street here is the most dense. That's about 38 units per acre. 5 Millennium is a little bit lower than that, but these are in the vicinity of the MBTA station. And this is one of the places where we have long wanted to foster some denser development, and so this is kind of it also happens to be in our MBTA community zone, and then here near Grafton Center, and these two areas here along Worcester Street, that density is primarily the housing authority developments, Maxwell Drive and Forest Lane, some of our existing most dense housing, and then this is the existing housing around New England Village, basically. But yeah, it's sort of interesting to see actually how most of Grafton is really not very dense at all, and it does tend to show that we seem to be focusing more of the density in the village areas that we've kind of identified as being the desirable areas. So Anne Marie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't notice that you indicated the Pleasant Street project there.
Yeah, this is Pleasant Street.
Oh, and it just is 8.
Yeah, it's not it's relatively less dense than some of the others.
8 units per acre.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 8. And actually that includes the back that includes the back part of it, which is eventually going to end up as conservation land. So the portion of the property that has the apartments on it is going to end up being, once the property is separated, it will calculate out to a higher density. That's really kind of getting into some of the weeds here. But I just thought that might be informative.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is a great map.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the fact that, these policies over the past 2 decades have played out in many ways.
Right. Just thought I'd share that. I'll send you guys copies of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Elena and Sarah, I will make sure to follow up, and I'll send reminder emails to everybody to get their comments in the matrix with enough time, and send out all of the materials, closer to the date, but for the new November 6th, date and time. And, yeah, I think other than that, I think we're good. This was really, really, really great. Thank you for all of your hard work. I know housing and land use chapters, those are always the biggest ones and always generate a lot of discussion. So I think it was very productive.
Thank you all for your comments.
And I will also share the detailed data I have on town land purchases and what flexible development has accomplished in terms of, let me see. No, I don't know. I guess just a very quick explanation of what Flex has accomplished. You know, as Bob noted, we created flexible development back in 1991, and since that time, we've had 34 subdivisions approved under the flexible development bylaw, of which 16 the developer chose the flexible development option. And with the exception of two projects that really are outliers in terms of the statistics, flexible development, oh gosh, let me find that. Yeah, here we go. Flexible development in 14 of the flexible development subdivisions, the ones that are kind of more or less in line with each other. 36% of the subdivision land was used for housing. 51% of the subdivision land was preserved as protected open space. As compared with the non-flexible developments, 57% of the land was consumed by housing and only 4% protected open space. So I think that tells you that Flex, as we've implemented, it's about roughly half of the subdivisions have chosen Flex, and of those, they've preserved and protected a lot of open space. The two outliers are Highfields and Oakmont Farms. Highfields has a lot of open space, but it's basically the golf course. So that sort of doesn't, it's an oddball in terms of the general objectives of Flex. Oakmont Farms has a couple of 100 acres that were given to the town. I think it was a couple of 100 acres given to the town, but not as protected open space. So that tilts the overall figures away from the primary objective of Flex, which is to combine clustered development and protected open space. But yeah, I'll share the specific numbers, but I just thought that's worth highlighting to say that Flex has, to a great degree, has accomplished its objective. And as I said earlier, I look at the possibility of open space residential development and or natural resource protection zoning as an extension of the concept to maybe make it stronger.
Steve?
Oh, and while I'm at it,
Dave, it's getting late.
yeah, I just wanted to.
It can wait, Dave. Put it in the matrix.
This is the picture I mentioned earlier about from 1949 up through today, how multifamily hasn't done very much, but single family development has really dominated. But that again, we talked about it earlier. I just thought I'd put the picture up there.
Thank you, David. If you could send that to us, that would be great. We have your review of housing from last year, but we would
Yep.
love to have that.
Right, that's a new one. That wasn't included in what I did last year. So yeah, I'll share that, and you know, I may have one or two other things that are worth sharing, but I won't take the time tonight.
I just want to say I'm so glad that I was able to get here tonight. Usually there's conflict, having been so involved in the previous master plan and all of this that we're talking about. I feel much better. We actually maybe accomplished something.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, Bob, but I went through all of the recommendations. There was something like 195 recommendations that the 2001 plan made, and I think I counted at least half of them that we have at least partly completed. So some of those recommendations were maybe not all that well thought out. Some of them in hindsight turned out to be, well, we didn't really want to do that. But we did complete all or part of something like half of them, which out of 195 recommendations is not too shabby.
We'll do better on this plan, right?
I would like to see us end up with a set of recommendations or action items that represent things that we can accomplish and that we all kind of want to accomplish, but we'll get there.
Alrighty, so I will do the associated follow-up and yeah, we'll go from there. So Elena, Sarah, and Mike, if you have anything else before we break.
I think that's it. Thank you all. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
All right. Have we done everything that we wanted set out to do here? Yeah, so I think we've discussed housing and land use. We've decided when our next meeting is going to be. And if there's nothing else, perhaps someone might care to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Now, where did I put my, there it is. Roll call. Victoria,
Aye.
Lindsay,
Aye.
Anne Marie. Anne Marie seems to have left the building. Deborah,
Aye.
Linda,
aye.
Brian. Brian's nodding his head yes. Chantel,
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Sue,
Aye.
Colleen.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for taking the time with us tonight.